Have you ever looked at your dog and thought, why is he so restless? He barks for no apparent reason, destroys things when you leave, gets anxious at the wrong times, can't truly relax. And the most common explanation people give is this: that's just how he is. But it isn't. Canine behavioral science has spent the last few decades studying exactly this, and what researchers have found has nothing to do with breed, personality, or bad luck. It has to do with routine. Not just any routine, the right routine, with the right elements in the right order at the right frequency. And most owners, even the most dedicated ones, even those who truly love their dogs, are building that routine in an incomplete way, without realizing it, with the best intentions. Today, I'm going to show you the 7 pillars that make up the routine of an emotionally balanced dog. These aren't random tips. They are parts of a system, and when one is missing, the dog feels it. Sometimes immediately, sometimes over months, in a quiet, subtle way. Every item here is grounded in animal behavior and canine neuroscience, but I'm not just going to give you information. I'm going to show you what each of these pillars means for the bond between you and your dog. And I'll save the most important one for the end, because it's the one most owners never stop to notice, and it's what separates a dog that merely survives routine from one that truly thrives in it. Have you ever noticed that your dog shows up in the kitchen at the exact same time every day, even before you get up to fill the bowl? That's not a coincidence, and it's not just hunger. Dogs have a sophisticated circadian rhythm, an internal biological clock that regulates not only when they feel hungry, but also when their bodies release cortisol, when their heart rate rises, and when their level of alertness increases. Cortisol, in normal amounts, is the hormone that prepares the body for action. It's expected. It's healthy. But when feeding times are irregular, 8 a.m. one day, noon the next, then 6 p.m., this system can't calibrate itself. The body ends up waiting for a signal that doesn't come at the right time. And that waiting comes at a cost. Dogs with inconsistent feeding schedules tend to have higher baseline anxiety levels than dogs with consistent routines, not because they're constantly hungry, but because their bodies are stuck in a state of chronic unpredictability. The nervous system doesn't know when it's safe to relax. Think about that for a moment. You wake up every day not knowing if you're going to eat, whether it'll be at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., or maybe at night. Not because there's no food, but because there's no pattern. How long would it take for you to start feeling anxious? Probably less than you think. For your dog, feeding at the right time isn't just about nutrition. It's a safety anchor. It's the body receiving a clear message. The world is predictable. You can trust it. You can relax. 2 fixed feeding times per day, kept consistent even on weekends, are enough to start regulating this system. Consistency in the bowl creates stability in the nervous system. And if feeding already has this level of emotional impact, the next item will surprise you because it's even more misunderstood than it seems. Be honest. When you think about walking your dog, what comes to mind? Bathroom needs? Burning off energy? Maybe a bit of socialization? That's what most owners think. And that's exactly why most walks are only doing half the job. A dog's nose contains up to 300 million olfactory receptors. Humans have around 6 million. Proportionally, the area of a dog's brain dedicated to processing smells is over 40 times larger than ours. That's not just an interesting anatomical detail. It's the key to understanding how dogs experience the world. For them, sniffing a lamppost isn't a distraction. It's reading. It's information. It's context. Every scent tells a story: what animal passed by, when it passed, what emotional state it was in, whether there was danger, food, or another dog nearby. When you pull the leash and rush along because he's already done what he needed to do, you're closing the book halfway through the page, and your dog's nervous system is left with that processing unfinished. Research in canine environmental enrichment shows that walks with olfactory freedom, where the dog chooses the pace and when to stop, reduce stress markers in measurable ways. Not just during the walk, but for hours afterward. A dog that processes the world through scent comes home calmer, more fulfilled, not from food, but from experience. And there's another piece most people overlook. The walk is when your dog accesses the world beyond the home environment. It's exposure to variation, different sounds, surfaces, smells, and encounters. This kind of controlled variation is what ethologists, animal behavior specialists, call environmental stimulation, and it's just as essential to a dog's emotional balance as food and water. A dog that only knows the same four walls and the same backyard is, neurologically speaking, living in an impoverished environment. And impoverished environments create problematic behaviors, not because the dog is difficult, but because the brain isn't being used the way it needs to be. Walking isn't hygiene, it's mental health. At least 20 to 30 minutes twice a day, with freedom to sniff, this changes your dog's emotional state in a way no indoor toy can replace. And speaking of toys, the next item will challenge another assumption that almost every owner carries. Because not every kind of play creates balance, it has to be the right kind at the right time. Have you ever physically exhausted your dog only for them to stay restless? Have you run with them, thrown the ball for half an hour, let them burn off energy, and still, a while later, they're pacing, barking, looking for trouble? This happens more often than people realize, and the explanation lies in the neurology of play. Dogs are predators by nature. Even the most domesticated, the gentlest ones, still carry in their nervous system a behavioral sequence inherited from their wild ancestors. Ethologists call this the predatory play sequence. It has stages: sniff, chase, capture, and dissect or resolve. When play activates this sequence fully, from beginning to end, the dog's nervous system receives a signal of completion. The loop closes. The animal can relax. But when play is just chasing without capture or capture without resolution, the loop stays open. The nervous system remains activated. The dog is physically tired, but mentally still in the hunt. That's why throwing a ball for 40 minutes can exhaust the body without calming the mind. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to anticipation, seeking, and motivation, is released in large amounts during the chase phase, but it needs resolution to start settling down. Without that resolution, the dopaminergic cycle keeps spinning. The result, a dog that's physically drained but mentally overstimulated. The right kind of play has a clear beginning and end. It allows the dog to capture, bite, and finish the object. It includes a wind-down phase, not an abrupt stop. Tug toys with resolution, controlled tug-of-war, scent games where the dog searches and finds, these are forms of play that close the loop. And there's one detail that changes everything. You are part of the game. It's not the dog playing alone in the yard. It's you, present and engaged, participating in the interaction. Because play with the owner isn't just exercise, it's bonding. It's the moment when your dog learns that you are a source of pleasure, challenge, and safety. The right kind of play doesn't just tire your dog out, it completes them. 15 to 20 minutes of structured play with presence, sequence, and resolution are worth more than an hour of random running. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel. We post every week to help owners understand what their dogs are trying to communicate and what they need that you might not even realize. And now that we've talked about feeding, movement, and play, here comes the element almost everyone underestimates, because it looks like laziness, but it's the exact opposite. Have you ever worried that your dog was sleeping too much? Have you had that quick thought, could something be wrong, when they stayed lying down for hours, not seeking interaction? Most owners have, and most are misreading it. Healthy adult dogs sleep between 12 and 14 hours a day. Puppies and senior dogs can reach up to 18 hours. Not as a sign of illness, but as a fundamental biological need. During sleep, a dog's brain goes through the same stages as the human brain, including REM sleep, the phase of rapid eye movement where dreaming happens. Have you ever seen your dog twitch, move their paws, or make running motions while asleep? They're processing the day. During REM sleep, the hippocampus, the brain structure responsible for memory and learning, consolidates the experiences from waking life. Everything your dog lived, smelled, learned, and felt gets organized and stored during sleep. Which means rest is not a pause in your dog's life. It's an active part of their learning. A dog that doesn't have the space to rest, whether because the environment is too noisy, because children are constantly interacting, or because the routine is fragmented, ends up with compromised neural processing. And the signs show up: irritability, difficulty responding to known commands, overreacting to small stimuli, anxiety without a clear cause. That's not bad behavior. It's a nervous system that hasn't had time to recover. What most owners don't do, but should, is ensure uninterrupted rest periods, a consistent, quiet spot where the dog knows they won't be disturbed. It doesn't have to be a separate room. It has to be a respected space. When you respect your dog's rest, you're not being neglectful. You're being the owner they need you to be. Letting them sleep isn't abandonment. It's care. And while their body rests, there's another need that can't wait. And it has everything to do with you. Not with how much time you spend together, but with the quality of that time. That's what we'll get into next. And it's where many owners, without realizing it, are falling short, even when they're physically present. Do you work from home? Are you around your dog all day? Then pay close attention. This one is especially for you. There's a very common belief among dog owners. The more time you spend with your dog, the better. More presence, more love, more balance. But the neuroscience of canine attachment tells a different story. Oxytocin, the hormone of bonding, trust, and emotional connection, is not released simply through physical presence. It's triggered by intentional interaction, direct eye contact, deliberate touch, genuine attention. A study published in the journal Science in 2015 became widely known in the field of ethology for showing that simple eye contact between owner and dog, voluntary, relaxed eye-to-eye gaze, raises oxytocin levels in both, in the human and the animal, at the same time. There's a technical name for this: bidirectional oxytocin feedback, and it's the same mechanism at work between a mother and her baby during breastfeeding. Think about what that means. You and your dog, just by looking at each other, are literally synchronizing bonding hormones. You're doing chemistry together, not metaphorically, biochemically. Now think about the owner who works from home, physically present all day, but sitting in front of a computer, on the phone, in meetings. The dog is in the same room, but the owner isn't really there. Physical presence without emotional presence doesn't release oxytocin, and your dog feels the difference, not as anger, not as stubbornness, but as a quiet gap in the bond, one that over time can show up as separation anxiety, attention-seeking behavior, or simply a dog that seems disconnected from its owner, even while lying right beside them. What works isn't quantity, it's quality. 10 minutes a day of intentional contact, eye-to-eye connection, deliberate petting, talking, yes, talking, dogs process emotional tone even if they don't understand the words, shared play, has more impact on the bond than hours of passive coexistence. Rituals help, creating consistent moments of connection, not necessarily long, but predictable, signals to your dog that they have a guaranteed place in your attention. It's not enough to be near. You have to be present. And the bond you build through social contact is what makes the next pillar work, because without connection, without trust, mental stimulation turns into stress. And this is where things go even deeper than most people imagine. Have you ever come home and found something destroyed? A torn cushion, a chewed-up shoe, trash scattered everywhere, scratches on the door. The first reaction is frustration. The second, often,
is to think the dog is problematic, badly behaved, difficult. But here's what behavioral science says about this. Destructive behavior, excessive barking, mild self-harm, running in circles, these are not signs of bad behavior. They are symptoms of an understimulated brain. When a dog doesn't get enough mental stimulation, cortisol, the stress hormone, builds up in the body. Not because something bad happened, but because the brain has no function, no challenge, no purpose. Ethologists call what follows displacement behaviors. The brain, in a state of chronic underactivation, starts creating its own stimulation using whatever is available. The couch, the trash, the door. This isn't revenge. Dogs don't operate on a logic of revenge. It's a nervous system desperately searching for something to do. The canine brain is cognitively sophisticated. Dogs solve problems, learn complex sequences, anticipate patterns, and read human microexpressions with impressive accuracy. That level of cognitive ability needs exercise, not just physical, mental. Mental stimulation can be simple. Scent games, hiding treats and letting the dog find them using their nose. Food puzzles, feeders that require problem solving before releasing the food. Training new commands, not because the dog needs obedience, but because learning activates dopamine and creates a sense of achievement. 10 to 15 minutes of mental stimulation per day can tire a dog out more than 30 minutes of running. Why? Because it requires active processing, not just movement. And there's an emotional layer here that goes beyond behavior. A dog that solves challenges, that discovers, achieves, learns, develops what researchers call canine self-efficacy, a kind of internal confidence, a sense of capability. This internal state changes how the animal responds to the world. Dogs with higher levels of mental stimulation tend to be less reactive, more tolerant of frustration, and more resilient to changes in routine. Boredom isn't harmless. It erodes balance from the inside out. You don't need expensive equipment. You need 15 minutes of intention per day. And now we reach the final point, the one I mentioned at the beginning, the one that separates a dog that merely exists within a routine from a dog that truly thrives in it. It's not the most complex one. In fact, it's the simplest. And that's exactly why it's the hardest to maintain.
You can do everything right. Fixed feeding times, walks with olfactory freedom, structured play, respected rest, intentional contact, daily mental stimulation. And even then, if it all changes every week, if schedules fluctuate, if rituals exist on Monday and Wednesday but disappear on the weekend, the effect is dramatically smaller than it could be. Because the ingredient that turns all the others into security isn't any specific item on the list, it's consistency. And here's the part most owners never hear. Dogs don't evaluate their environment based on what happens. They evaluate it based on the predictability of what happens. That's the central conclusion of decades of research in animal welfare. Canine attachment theory, derived and adapted from John Bowlby's studies on human attachment, shows that dogs form internal working models, mental maps of the world built from repeated patterns. When those patterns are consistent, the map is clear, the world is predictable. The nervous system can settle into the parasympathetic state, the mode of calm, digestion, learning, and connection. When patterns are inconsistent, even if each individual experience is positive, the map becomes confusing. The nervous system stays on alert, not because there's danger, but because the animal can't anticipate what comes next. And a being that cannot anticipate what comes next cannot, by definition, feel safe. Think about human life for a moment. Imagine working a job where you never know your schedule, whether there will be a meeting, whether your boss will be in a good mood or irritated, whether you'll have time to eat. Even if each individual day is fine, the unpredictability itself is exhausting. That's what your dog experiences when routine is inconsistent. And the cost isn't just behavioral, it's physiological. Dogs in unpredictable environments tend to have chronically elevated cortisol levels, the stress hormone. Over time, this affects the immune system, digestion, sleep, and the ability to learn. Inconsistency isn't neutral. It has weight. But here's the other side of that coin, and this is where the emotional payoff of everything in this video comes together. When you create consistency, you're not just reducing stress, you're building safety, a kind of safety your dog internalizes that becomes part of who they are, that allows them to explore, to play, to connect, to truly rest, because the world around them is reliable. You become the anchor. Not because you're perfect, not because the routine never fails, but because the overall pattern is clear, and your dog has learned that it can trust that pattern. Every time you stick to the schedule, even when it's hard, every time you go for the walk, even when you're tired, every time you pause for 5 minutes to be truly present, you're making a deposit into your dog's emotional bank. And they don't forget. Routine isn't a cage, it's the language you use to tell them, you are safe, I'm here, the world makes sense. That moment when you pick up the leash and they explode with joy, that moment when they come and lie down beside you for no apparent reason, that moment when they look at you with a calm that feels almost human, those moments are not small to them. They never were. And now that you understand what's behind them, they shouldn't be small to you either.
If any of these 7 pillars change the way you see your dog, if you looked at them while watching and thought, that's it, then you're already the kind of owner they deserve. We post every week to help owners understand what their dog is trying to communicate. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. And tell me in the comments, which of the 7 made the most sense to you? Which one are you going to start applying today? It can be just one word, but I want to know. We read the comments, every single one.